Executive Vice President of 1199. You're in our member's house here on Broadway. I want to thank everyone for coming. You know, working people have gone through a lot over the last 2.5 years in Rhode Island. This pandemic has tested our social safety nets, has tested what it means to work for a living. Essential workers, like many of the unions represented here, who represent teachers, construction workers, service workers of all kinds, healthcare workers, have been put to the test over the last 2 years and been asked to sacrifice a lot personally to take care of those that they need to do at their work. And so this roundtable discussion is meant to have an honest discussion about what working people in Rhode Island are going through. And we have a special guest, Secretary of State. Thank you for joining us and listening to what our members in our organizations have been going through. And, you know, I think there is a beautiful moment. As the pandemic wanes, and as we come into the future of what Rhode Island is for working people, organized labor can be a big solution to a lot of the problems that people are facing. And we can be partners in helping to shape a Rhode Island that is equitable and fair for working people and families. So I just want to thank everybody. Kind of the order of events, we're gonna start off with our brothers from the AFT. Each organization is going to take about 2 to 5 minutes to talk about what's going on in their perspectives, in their membership, and then we're gonna have a discussion with the secretary about her thoughts, and then we'll just work our way through the conversation. So I thank everybody for coming. Thank you. Frank, would you like to get started?
Sure. Frank Flynn, Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals. So obviously we've just come off of probably the worst 3 years in public education in history with the pandemic. Things are starting to return to some sense of normal, whatever the new normalcy is. And certainly there's been a tremendous disruption in the traditional education systems. We also have tremendous mental health needs for not only our students, but even in many cases with our faculty and staff. One of the things that we've noticed over the past year is the most successful school programs are those that are developed collaboratively between the unions and the teachers. We've got some great examples: community schools in Pawtucket, professional development academies like we have in Jones District of West Warwick, a number of other very successful programs that are done organically when there's that level of cooperation. One of the most important things that you'll have when you're elected governor is the right to appoint people to executive positions. And when in the situation we're in right now is we don't have that same level of cooperation with the agency that governs our work for the most part. I guess my question to you would be, what would you do that is different that would allow us to become real partners in moving the education agenda and the healthcare agenda forward?
Well, thanks, Frank, and thanks to your members and everybody else who's represented here in the labor movement for your amazing work during this pandemic. I mean, it was, as a mom of 3 kids, I just couldn't imagine having to go through what you did in the teaching professions and the caregiving economy that is so essential to each and every one of us. You know, my background is in public policy, and we come at things in a very different way. I have 30 years of working here in Rhode Island in a collaborative way, and I know that our best solutions are when we actually include people in the policy-making table, in crafting solutions, because teachers in the classroom know what has to happen, and they need to feel that they're being listened to as part of the solutions that we're bringing up together. So the team that I have working around me at the Department of State does that now in elections, in business, in the archival and historic processing of our documents, in accountability and transparency of government out of our public information office. You can see it. I've done it for 8 years. Include people that are affected by the workings of my office in generating the solution, working out the solutions, along with including the people who are affected, right? In your case, it's the parents. And between the parents, the teachers, the school administrators, the school committees, and the executive branch, we can absolutely turn our schools around in a way that makes all of you feel better about coming every day to school, whether it be fixing like the deteriorating school infrastructure, which thankfully we've started to do, which I will continue, whether it means passing a constitutional amendment that gives teeth to the fact that, you know, we want to have strict systems in place. But absolutely, listening and working collaboratively is the best way that we are going to make a better future for our kids in our schools.
Madam Secretary. So I'm going to sneak 2 questions in for one.
Wait, not surprised.
So I don't think it could be any more clear that there's a funding disparity between urban districts and suburban districts. And in that funding system even allows for suburban districts to poach money from the urban districts, making it even more difficult to provide support to those families who struggle. And I think we also have an over-reliance on a standardized testing system that doesn't account for the social and emotional well-being of kids, families, and even staff. And on top of that, the standardized testing system with having, you know, a focus on teaching to the test doesn't allow for teachers and other education staff to spend that time to work with kids in the capacity where they really need to develop and grow so they can strive, especially post-pandemic.
So it is very clear, and I hear it from many partners and players in the educational sector, that the funding formula needs to be looked at. Thankfully, the General Assembly has started that conversation. It's probably one of our harder conversations, that's it, because it's been historically characterized as a zero-sum game. Some people are going to win, some people are going to lose. It cannot be done that way. We all have to have some winning in this system. And I am going to be the leader that brings us to that space. Now, it may mean that we need to have more funding out of the state for the localities. The property tax system that we have is a terrible way to fund schools, in my opinion. And so we need to start shifting some of these responsibilities, because I care deeply about how a kid does in North Kingstown, and I care deeply about how a kid does in Central Falls or Providence or Coventry or West Warwick. All of our kids need to move forward. And so we will absolutely be looking at shifting the funding formula in a way that's more equitable and just, and doesn't play into that very easy us versus them mentality. It's a lot of hard work, but it can be done. Standardized testing, I think, has been proven to not be a great indicator of what's going on. Now, we need some form of measurement, and I know, because I've talked to teachers, that they're not opposed to measurement. They do it every day in their classrooms. It's about establishing a way of doing it that we're going to commit to, that we're all in agreement on, and then stick to it for 3 to 5 years. But it has to be with everybody at the table agreeing. And I know that sounds difficult, but it has to be done. And we then also need to provide the kinds of resources that then support those teachers in the classroom and those kids in the classroom that need more assistance. I mean, we have school districts right now that honestly don't have the funding for aides in the classroom. And then we have aides in the classroom in districts where the kids aren't as disadvantaged. That's a disbalance. We need to tackle all of those things as part of building an education system that really makes it so that every child in our state succeeds.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up with one other question?
Sure.
One of the other areas that we need to focus on, we believe, is providing more access to public higher education. Many of our, similar to what the Promise Scholarship did to TCRI, it expanded to Rhode Island College and URI, and also look at some other programs for skilled training programs for other students that wouldn't opt to go to college. So what would be your plans to support programs of that nature?
Absolutely, you know, we need to provide, in the economy that we have right now, where things are changing all the time, we need to provide affordable next educational steps, whether that be a trade or going into some sort of higher education field. The Promise program was a beginning. It needs to be continued. Because in this economy, you just need to know more. And you, by the way, it can't be just right after high school, in my opinion. It needs to happen later on in life as well. Because you can go out and work for a few years and then suddenly realize, because you're more mature, because there are other things going on in life, you didn't take advantage of something like a Rhode Island Promise. There should be some credits available to adults that allow them to grow. Because in the end, we pool our taxes so that we can invest in people. That is the best way that we can use our tax dollars. Not in gimmicks, not in specific tax programs, or in specific kinds of businesses. It's in the people. And so I will be, as part of my administration, be looking at ways to expand the Rhode Island Promise program. I think Rhode Island Promise was challenging on RIC in particular, and somewhat on URI. You start in one place, okay, fine, but then you have to balance the negatives that may have been developed from implementing, you know, a first step, and that needs to be balanced out as well, because our public higher education institutions are the pathway for our own people to be able to move ahead. And we have to find other tracks. Now that we have renewable energy coming on the field, for example, many of the skill sets that we're using in the trades around defense, welding, you know, all those things are absolutely equivalent to what we might need in a renewable energy sector. We need to make sure that those are good union-paying jobs that are at the end as well. So there's a lot to be done there. It's very exciting, and I look forward to working with all of you on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, AFT. Ben, Carpenters.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Ben Branshaw from the Carpenters Union. Obviously, our members are interested in new construction. It's what keeps them working. But also, if you know me, and I know you do, I'm going to say the same thing I've been saying for a few years now. We need to address the issues that happen on the construction jobs that are coming, even ones that are subsidized by city or state tax credits, like the Providence TSA, the Central Falls TSAs. The Rebuild Rhode Island tax credits even. There's wage theft and tax fraud happening on these jobs. And I know we've talked extensively about this over the years, but there have been a litany of different bills to address this issue that have failed at the State House over the last 4 years. There's been at least 2 bills every year that try to address this issue. And I guess if I'm limited to a question, it's what could you do as governor to make sure that issue's addressed, or that some of those bills progress further than they have?
You know, this is a great topic for a day like today, Labor Day, right?
Yeah.
Because the benefit of the labor movement in the United States is to set, areas of more equitable and just work. And wage and benefits are key. We all, whether we're unionized or not, owe a debt of gratitude to the men and women who in the past have stood up and said, that's not fair. And wage theft and tax fraud are unconscionable. Unfortunately, they're always going to be bad players, and we need to make sure that we tackle them, yes, through legislative action, which you will, as I have supported in the past, as we've gone to the General Assembly on these bills, you will find somebody who will champion that with you. But more importantly, laws can get passed. But then the question is, are they then implemented? Are they acted on? And I am fiercely committed to fairness and justness. And so I will make sure that the executive branch that carries out the legal weight of whatever we're able to, whatever's already in statute against wage theft and tax fraud, or is coming in from the General Assembly. That means making sure that people like my good colleague Peter Nerona, who's the Attorney General, who's done a great job in prosecuting stuff, gets the support in the budget that he needs. That means making sure our Department of Labor and Training gets the financial support and the staff resources that it needs to make sure that we have an equitable and just playing field on the construction side.
Yeah, great. And any new tax credit programs or things like, because there have been tax credit programs that have been implemented in the past that didn't have any clause to prevent this kind of thing from happening on projects subsidized by that particular program. So any future economic plans or tax credit programs, I think need to have that addressed right in the language.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we'd like to go on to our brother and sister unions at UFCW. If you'd like to say a few things.
Sure. Madam Secretary, thank you for joining us on this beautiful Labor Day here in Providence at the House of Labor, SEIU. Thank you for hosting this talk with the Lieutenant Governor. Future Governor, excuse me, Madam Secretary. I'm Tim Mealy. I'm the president of UFCW Local 328, and we represent mostly folks in retail food, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, and folks in nursing homes as well. Over 3 years ago, prior to the pandemic starting, we had an issue with one of our largest employers, Stop and Shop, and we struck that employer for 11 days. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for coming out and joining us on those picket lines during our strike. I know our members greatly appreciated it. And one thing I said about you, Madam Secretary, is that you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. And so we thank you very much for doing that. And since that, we've had the pandemic where, for the first time, folks who work in retail food were actually seen and considered to be essential workers. And it's something that we've known in UFCW forever, that we are the frontline workers in the food industry, that we provided people with their meals every day. We had to stay open, we couldn't close. So it was very, very important that during that time I fought with the state of Rhode Island and the state of Massachusetts to make sure that there was hazard pay for people who worked in retail food at that time. That we were trying to get PPE that was unavailable at the time for folks who worked in there. And it was a very, very trying time to get that. And trying to get through to the governor's office and everybody else at the time was very frustrating at times. We met with a lot of dead ends. So I hope that when you become governor that you open those lines of communication with labor and the frontline workers who are going to be out there in a situation with this pandemic. I don't want to speak for SEIU, but those folks who work in the hospitals and those were frontline workers as well too. So I thank them for everything they did during the pandemic. One of the things that we find very important, especially things very important to talk about on Labor Day, is organizing. Organizing is the lifeblood of the labor movement. We can not always depend on the employers that we have still being there. And so, and one of the things I always push for is organizing at my local. Right across the street from here is Seven Stars Bakery. We just recently, Sam Marvin, my director of organizing, did a great job along with Del Santos to organize 5 of those locations here in the state of Rhode Island. And that employer did something that most employers during an organizing drive won't do. They recognized the union. They didn't fight us. They didn't put on an anti-union campaign. They didn't scare the hell out of people. They didn't fire people. They came out and said, okay, we don't want to go through this. We recognize that we respect our workers, and we want to recognize their right to choose a union, so we will sit down and bargain a contract with them. So they've agreed that we're going to be bargaining with them very shortly. But not all employers do that. Most employees, that's the exception to the rule. Most employers will fight you tooth and nail. They'll fire the workers. They'll break the laws that have been on the books for the last 75 years. They'll break the National Labor Relations Act. They'll violate it in any way, shape, or form they can. One of the things I want to ask you, as the future governor of the state of Rhode Island, I would like to introduce a piece of legislation that has just been passed in the state of Connecticut. and it forbids employers to hold captive audience meetings. And basically what that is, it does not allow for them to bring these folks in and basically scare the hell out of them and not have anybody there to respond to them. They do this constantly, they'll do it every day, they'll just berate these people and beat these people until they take the fight right out of them. And this is what hurts our organizing drives more than anything. So I would like to introduce at the next round of legislation a bill that would prohibit captive audience meetings in any organizing drive. And I just want to know, as Governor of Rhode Island, would you support that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, there's a reason why we have parents in our society, and being able to hear and let the employees choose is fundamental. Choice is one of the things that we value the most as human beings. And so having a situation where only one side gets to talk about everything is not, honestly, I think it's un-American, right? The labor movement is American. And so I would absolutely support that.
Yes, I want to thank you, Madam Secretary, for all you've done for our members. That's great. It said a lot, for me a lot, what you are all about. I'm on the East Providence Waterfront Commission, and one thing I think all our members here is important is, and I know this is something you're very passionate about, is affordable housing. I watched the debate last week, and I don't think that you got an opportunity to actually spell that out. So, can you tell us what your thoughts on?
Yeah, no. So I hope to be the housing governor, and it's because housing is foundational. I mean, our colleagues in the educational sector will tell you that a kid that moves twice within a school year has a very hard time catching up. And that would be because the parents can't afford the rent or they can't afford the utilities. Housing is a social determinant of health. And I know that our colleagues in the health field see that. And housing has a huge impact on people's mental health as well. So housing is even foundational to how we deal with the environment, because how we heat and cool our homes absolutely has an impact on our planet. So to me, now we're in a moment right now where housing isn't affordable to everybody other than the very, very wealthy. And I find it interesting, right, when I go around talking about certain issues. Some people say education is their #1 issue. It's usually the people who have already solved the housing issue. If the housing issue is not solved, that's where their head is, because you need a roof over your head that you know that your family's going to be fine in. And so, as governor, I will have a plan where we are going to work with the cities and towns and incentivize and make it easy for people to build sustainable housing that, yes, is a little bit more dense possibly than what we've been used to, but that meets people's needs. And you know, so housing is one of those public policy issues that helps in a variety of ways. And if, again, we have limited tax dollars, we should be investing them in the spots where we know that more than one issue area is going to be helped. And that's why affordability of housing is so key. Some of it will be housing for the homeless or the unhoused. Some of it will be for low income with subsidies. But some of it is just going to be regular working folks housing that everybody's in, really is part of the American dream. So, you know, a lot of this is less about gimmicky program. It's more about sitting at the table and saying, okay, what's it gonna, how are we gonna get this done? And municipalities have a lot of different ways in which they delay the building of housing and adds to the costs of the building of housing. As a former director of Housing Works Rhode Island, as a nonprofit leader that worked on affordable housing issues, that got us the first two housing bond issues, built 2,000 affordable homes. I know how to bring people together to solve housing. And that's what I'm going to do as governor. We're going to work with the cities and towns. We're going to use some of this monies for education, for infrastructure, and take down the barriers to making sure that we can build housing quickly that is affordable to the working folks of the state.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Tim and Dominic.
Okay.
Next is Kelly from 401.
Hi, I'm Kelly DiBiasio. president of SEIU Local 401. We represent state employees who work for Department of Labor and Training mostly. Over the pandemic, we saw lots of concerns with, I work for unemployment and temporary disability insurance, and obviously those programs were strained. We're working with programs that are underfunded historically, and the computer programs and technology that we use to do our jobs is obsolete at best. What would you do as governor to help bring our programs, not just at DLT, but throughout the state, into the 21st century?
So thanks for that question. What I've done at the Department of State, in terms of completely transforming the way our government works, is exactly what I'm going to do everywhere else. And you start by having a conversation with the people on the ground, people like you. You know what the problems are. I don't have to go hire a 6-figure consultant to tell me that. I just need to have a couple of people in your office, and they're the leadership there, and hear from you. What are the systems that need fixing? What needs to be updated? Some of it is not very sexy. It doesn't make it into, you know, the newscasts. There's no ribbon cutting for like the new, you know, software, hardware programs that get invested in, but they're essential. And then there's a professional development that happens. We completely starve our public sector of the ability to grow and that space to grow in, to become better. And so it's crisis after crisis after crisis, and there's no stepping back and say, wait a minute. But if we invest in our hardware and software, we include, you know, our state workers as the people driving what needs to happen, along with input from the people receiving the benefits, you can figure this out and turn government into something that really works for people. It's something that I love to do because it shows people that their government is there for them. One of my favorite moments when I'm campaigning is small business people who, because I have the corporations division, will say to me, I love your office. I'm in and out so quickly. That office does pretty much the same as other government offices like yours. It takes an application, it reviews it, it passes it along to make sure that we have an order to how business gets done in our state. What's different is I'm able to tell them that was done with 15, 20, 30-year state employees that are all members of a labor union and were invested in and are working on systems that have been invested as well. That's leadership. That's caring about who's doing the work for you and how they're getting it done. And I'm looking forward to working with you on this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have 32 BJ.
Buenas tardes, gracias por estar aquí. Mi nombre es Celsa del Pozo y soy una miembro de la 32BJ. Vengo en representación de todos mis compañeros.
Good afternoon, thank you for being here. I am Celsa del Pozo. I'm a member of BJ32 and I'm here to represent our members.
También soy miembro de la mesa ejecutiva de la 32BJ.
I'm also a member of the executive branch at BJ32.
El mayor reto que hemos tenido en estos 2 años atrás de la pandemia,
the largest challenge that we've had during the past 2 years of the pandemic,
fue que desde el día 1 hasta el presente no hemos parado de trabajar.
is that since day 1 up until today, we have not stopped working.
Nos declararon miembros esenciales. Yo digo bravo por eso.
We were declared essential workers. We live angry because of that.
Pero el Estado a nosotros no nos dio un centavo más. Ganamos el sueldo que recibíamos semanalmente.
I'm sorry, interpreter wants to correct. I say bravo because of that, but they have not paid us any hazard pay for the work that we've done during that time up until now.
Y no solo eso.
And not just that.
Íbamos a trabajar. Cuando había alguien infectado en las oficinas, nos mandaban a nosotros a desinfectar.
We would go to work, we were sent to work, we would go to work, and when someone was infected at any one of the offices, we were sent to go clean.
Solo con una máscara y los guantes.
With just a mask and some gloves.
Íbamos a nuestros hogares donde están nuestra familia, nuestros nietos y nuestros hijos.
We would then return home to our family, where our grandkids, our kids, our
con la posibilidad de infectarlo a ellos también.
With the possibility of infecting them as well.
Eso fue uno de los mayores retos que tuvimos hace 2 años atrás hasta la fecha.
That was one of the greatest challenges that we faced starting 2 years ago up until today.
Otra cosa también.
Another thing.
Tenemos varias compañías fantasmas
We also have a lot of companies that are phantom
que tienen nuestros compañeros empleados sin declararlo, no tienen unión.
that have our partners employed, but they have no representation, they have no union.
Y son compañías que tienen otros nombres fuera que también están declarados con unión.
They're companies that have other names that are declared under unions.
Mi pregunta es,
My question is,
usted como gobernadora
you as
o
governor,
próxima gobernadora,
Or like our
¿trabajaría
next
de la mano con nosotros para resolver esos problemas
would you work hand in hand with us to resolve those
y sacar
problems
a flote esas compañías fantasmas
and expose those phantom companies
para que nuestros compañeros también salgan a la luz y tengan voz propia y tengan todos los beneficios que como unión nosotros tenemos?
so that our partners can come to the light and have all have their voices heard and have all the benefits that we as a union already have.
E implementaría algún beneficio para que en caso de otra pandemia podamos recibir una bonificación por nuestros trabajos.
And would you add some kind of incentive to ensure that if another pandemic happens, we are paid hazard pay for our work?
Gracias, Elsa, por esas palabras y por esa dedicación que tú y tus compañeros han demostrado a través de toda esta pandemia. I'm going to do my own.
My job is done.
Thank you, Elsa, for the dedication that you've shown. Are you gonna do it? Okay, good. I can focus on one language. Thank you. Mira, lo que tú estás trayendo a la luz es súper importante.
What you're bringing to the light is super important.
Porque esta economía, para que llegue a ser más justa y equitativa,
Because for this economy to be more just and equitable,
tenemos que tener las mismas reglas de juego para todo el mundo.
we have to have the same rules of play for everyone.
Así que, bajo mi administración,
So under my administration,
las compañías fantasmas
those phantom companies
no van a tener tregua.
no van a tener.
Tregua. They're not going to have a break.
They're not.
Sorry. Bear with us. Porque tenemos que tener las mismas reglas de juego para todo el mundo.
Because we have to have the same playing rules for everyone.
Yo sé en carne propia, por amistades mías, por gente de nuestra comunidad, lo mucho que sufre la gente en esas compañías.
I know personally from my friends, personal acquaintances, our community, how much people suffer in those companies.
Y eso tiene que parar.
And that has to stop.
Y me alegra tener tu apoyo y el de tus colegas en esta lucha.
I'm grateful to have your support and that of your colleagues in this fight. Thank you.
Con relación al beneficio durante la pandemia que no se dio.
In regards to the hazard pay that wasn't paid during the pandemic,
Parte de lo que nosotros como comunidad tenemos que hacer es aprender de la experiencia vivida.
part of what we have to do as a community is to learn from our lived experience.
Y no esperar a que haya otra crisis
And not to wait for another crisis
para sacarnos de la manga. Las soluciones de la manga.
to pull out our solutions out of our back pocket.
Exacto. That's very good. Eso quiere decir que de ahora tenemos que estar trabajando en esas estructuras que cuando llegue la próxima pandemia, porque va a llegar,
That means that as of right now, we got to be working on those structures that when the next pandemic comes, because it will come,
sepamos a quién se le va a dar ese beneficio especial, esa bonificación, y por qué razones.
we'll,
Que las reglas de juego estén claras.
we'll know who's going to get that hazard pay, under what conditions, so that all the rules of play are clear.
Y no que sea simplemente parte de un año electoral.
And that it's not just a part of like an electoral year.
Gracias a ti.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you, Secretary Gorbea, for coming. I'm Dan Nicolai. I'm also on the executive board. And just to add, that was great to BJ. So just to add to what Celsa has said, our members who do cleaning and security here in Rhode Island, we want Rhode Island to prosper, and we want our state to support responsible business. We get concerned, though, when we see that our tax dollars are sometimes supporting irresponsible businesses and substandard jobs. And others on this panel have talked about that already. So we see a lot of good things happening, but we get concerned, for example, when we see our members who work in good union jobs cleaning the airport talk to people who work side by side with them, working as contractors for airlines, and even for the airport corporation, which we own, and the airlines, which our tax dollars have heavily subsidized, especially during the pandemic. But people are making minimum wages with few or no benefits. That's a real concern to us, and it doesn't seem like our tax dollars being used wisely. We are concerned when we see in some of our court systems the cleaning being done by franchises who are notorious for misclassifying people where they don't even admit that they are employees. So we have people who are cleaning the workers' compensation court who themselves may not even have access to worker compensation. So these are just concerns that we have. We're concerned when we see Amazon, which has broken labor laws from coast to coast and interfered with people's rights to organize, being welcomed with open arms to Johnston with the tax stabilization agreement. But as far as we can tell, no questions asked about the permanent jobs and whether they're going to be quality jobs and whether people are going to have the right to organize or whether those rights are going to be violated with captive audience meetings and interrogation and other violations that we've seen in other places. So I guess my question would be, as governor, what could you see that could be done to get our state government to create incentives to provide good family supporting jobs rather than bad ones?
Well, as government, my commitment, not just to all of you, but to the people of Rhode Island, is to have an economy that's equitable and just. And a lot of these things are in how we manage our state government and our state resources. Going fiercely after wage theft and misclassification of workers is key. And you know what? The right partners in the private for-profit sector will agree. I know people in the for-profit sector that absolutely want us to get people to play by the rules. Fairness is key in our government and in the use of our resources. And so, you know, I will be there with you, and there will be an open door to listen, to come in and hear from you what's going on an ongoing basis. Not just when there's a problem, but we need to have regular check-ins. And I look forward to doing that with all of you as government. That's the kind of leadership that I hope to deploy. The privatization of public sector jobs is of concern to me. Because there are reasons why certain activities are in the public sector. They're part of the public good. Now, there are others that absolutely belong in the private for-profit sector. I'm not saying that everything has to be, you know, in the public sector. But we have to think about that very carefully. Because in the end, there are certain activities of government that are about the people. And it's not about widgets, it shouldn't be about corporate profits ahead of people. And I will be a governor that invests in our people and takes care of it. That's why partnering with you all in the labor sector actually makes a lot of sense.
Wonderful, thank you. Next we have Dawn Williams, who's an RN over at Butler and a 1199 delegate. Dawn.
Hi, good afternoon, and happy Labor Day. My name's Dawn Williams. I'm a nurse at Butler Hospital. I've been a nurse for about 15 years, and 8 of them have been with Butler. As I think about this national holiday for labor, I'm reminded of how lucky I am to belong to a union. The difference labor unions have made on working families is nothing short of the difference between a career with dignity, respect, fair wages, good health care, or being at the mercy of corporations who, for the sake of profit, would prefer their workers not have any of those benefits. There is a staffing crisis at our healthcare facilities in Rhode Island right now, and this has come from a lot of different reasons: COVID, aging workforce, poor working conditions, wage stagnation, an abject failure of the employers to do what's necessary to attract and retain valuable workers. The passage of safe staffing ratios in hospitals and a seat at the table for workers in determining the distribution of ARPA funds to maximize this stabilization and retention of quality training of workers is absolutely necessary if we're going to strengthen and reinforce the high quality health care the people of the state deserve. You know, when I started at Butler 8 years ago, I never imagined that we would be in this position. It's been a difficult few years in healthcare, especially. You know, and it's going to require a large investment in order to stabilize this and get you know, our healthcare institutions in Rhode Island back to a place where they need to be. And do you have any thoughts about how we can achieve that goal?
Well, thank you, Dawn. I mean, key, of course, is including your viewpoints into the conversations about how these dollars get distributed. And again, that is something. If you look at how, it's not just because I'm saying it. Like, right? Like when I received dollars from the federal government to improve elections in our state, what did I do? I didn't just sort of go with my staff and say, this is how we're doing it, or hear from only them. I said, no, the election system is much bigger than just our office. It includes voters in a variety of communities. It includes cities and towns. It includes the Board of Elections. It includes advocacy groups that care deeply, like Common Cause or League of Women Voters. And so one of the first things I did was to put a group together and say, okay, how should we, give me some advice, give me some input into how you would spend. At that point it was $3 million that we just got. What are the key points? And we went through, of course, about $6 million worth of requests. but that's okay, because you got to get the whole thing on the table, and then from there you say, okay, then you triage. And it doesn't diminish my role as a leader to ask others what needs to happen. It's okay to listen to people and say to them later on, look, I was able to do this, I was unable to do that. But listening to people on the ground about what needs to happen is key. And that's what sadly has been missing in, I think, you know, our government. It's supposed to be a representative democracy, not a government of the few. And I look forward to hearing with you. I mean, thank you for all the work that you and all your colleagues have done over some, I mean, it's not just the pandemic, it's the behavioral and emotional mental health crisis that this country is facing. And as a mom, I see it in our kids, in grown-ups. I mean, we have to invest in our behavioral and emotional health infrastructure. And we have to invest in our caregiving economy. All of you are part, whether you're in the janitorial ranks or you're, you know, like building institutions, like you care about the people. That is what you're doing here. And we need to make sure that we have an infrastructure that supports our people, that's being built with good labor. We need to make sure that we have housing for people. We need to have education. And all of that can be done in a much better way if we're listening to each other and able to figure it all out together. You know, in Spanish, when I campaign in Spanish, I have a phrase that I use a lot. It's "Pa'lante junto," onward together. And I feel that very strongly. And on this Labor Day, again, I'm very grateful to have each and every one of you committed to helping change the way that this state is run so that it is a community that's more equitable and just. And you know what? When we do that, we absolutely will grow the economy. Because there's no better calling card for growing an economy than having a group of people that says this is an awesome place to work, live, grow, hold in, and live. But it has to be everybody, not just a few. And that's what we're about. That's what I have to do as governor.
Awesome. Thank you. We have just two more panelists.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'll keep my shirt right. It's a short.
Adelina is a CNA at Greenville Nursing Home Rehabilitation Center, run by Genesis, which is the largest for-profit nursing home company in the country.
Hi, my name is Adelina. So, you know, during the pandemic, we went through hell, and like the nursing homes got hit really hard. At my facility, we lost like around 20 plus residents. So throughout the pandemic, you know, we had to bag our own patients, which is hard on us because, you know, we were them like for many years. So they were like part of our family, you know. So that was the worst part of the pandemic. And a lot of our coworkers, you know, were stressed, and a lot of them after that they left because of the working conditions. So before the pandemic, we were short-staffed, and the pandemic made things worse in the nursing homes and the hospitals. And we're still working short. So we had a bill passed, and the governor pushed our bill back for safe staffing twice, which it wasn't very nice of him. And we were very disappointed. So we were like very disappointed that he did that, and we were not even notified that he was going to do that. So we were looking forward because that bill had passed, and we thought finally, after all these years, our residents are going to get the best quality care that they deserve. And then it got pushed back. So like I said, we were disappointed. And also, like, you know, during that time, we had to fight for having a hazard pay because our companies didn't want to give us hazard pay. But thanks to our union, we had to fight for that. And right now, you know, people are still leaving because the working conditions are still bad and the wages are horrible. And there's no more, like a lot of companies right now are stopping the bonuses, which a lot of people were like looking forward to the bonuses because that would help them because the wages are so low. And they're stopping doing that. And at the end of the day, people are leaving to work for agency or becoming travel nurses because they pay more. And we're feeling like we're left behind. They don't care about us. As the governor, what would you do to make sure that the nursing home and the hospital workers are getting better wage than it would be like as a traveler nursing so they can maintain their staff?
So so with regards to nursing homes, I've sat down with some of the local nursing home owners, which by the way is a different universe than the big corporations that are now coming into the field, which worries me a lot, right? But one of the things that I know was missing of this was Medicaid reimbursement rates need to go up. And I get that. So part of being a leader is to making sure that you're looking at an issue like yours and saying, okay, this safe staffing bill might run into interference or problems from the other side unless we do something with regards to Medicaid rates. And so one of the things that I'm committed to doing is to making sure that we do those rates. Now the Medicaid rate increase does have to make it down to the people doing the work. Right? It can't just be pocketed, and I get that too. But when you just deal with one bill on its own, it gets easy to do a win-lose mentality. Oh, this is going to be a win for the labor union, but it's going to be against the company or whoever it is that's running the place. And we need to move away from that frame and say, okay, wait a minute, what is it that you're really worried about? Is it your profits? Well, we need to talk about that because You know, the people here you need a stability of workers, and our people there need a certain ratio in order for this to be done right. And that's where the negotiation comes. I mean, you're all in the negotiating tables, right? So that's what needs to happen. And you can't be afraid of sitting people in a room and saying, we got to figure this out. But the North has to be, how do we take care of people? If you take care of people, you take care of everything else. If you worry about what's happening with X or Y company, you lose your North. Which is, who are the people who are being taken care of in the nursing home or in the facility? And by the way, who are the people taking care of? Who are the kids, right? But then what are the teachers experiencing as well? It's the same thing even in a construction site, right? How you're treating your workers matters to the professionalism of that construction site. It costs more, but that's what we're here for. Like, we need to be able to have an economy that works for everybody. Okay.
Wonderful, thank you. We have one last panelist, Martha, who's a home-based child care provider.
Gracias, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Mirta Tavares. Estoy aquí representando a las proveedoras de cuidado infantil.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Mirta Tavares and I'm here representing the family child care providers.
He sido proveedora de cuidado infantil durante 15 años.
I have been a family child care provider for 15 years.
Durante la pandemia fuimos declaradas trabajadores esenciales.
During the pandemic, we were declared essential workers.
Y tenemos alrededor de 6 meses tratando de negociar un contrato que nos permita tener un salario digno.
And we've spent the last 6 months negotiating a contract that would allow us to have a dignified salary.
Mientras cuidamos los niños de nuestra comunidad y así nosotras podemos mantener nuestra familia.
While we care for children from our community and be able to sustain our families.
Esa es una de las preguntas que tenemos. No entendemos cómo todavía estamos en esa situación si somos trabajadores esenciales.
That's one question that we have is why are we in this situation? We don't understand why we're in this situation when we're essential workers.
Otra cosa que atravesamos la proveedora de cuidado infantil es que no contamos con seguro médico ni plan de retiro.
Another challenge that we as family child care providers face is that we don't have health insurance and we don't have retirement plans.
Nos gustaría saber cuál sería su aporte para nosotras y algo importante que decimos nosotras las proveedoras.
We would like to know what would be your view on us, your take on this, and something important that we as providers like to say.
Que nosotras cuidamos los futuros gobernadores de este estado.
That we take care of the future governors of this state.
No entendemos
and we don't
cómo nos
understand
escuchan
how we're not heard.
Y nos permiten vivir.
And you allow us to live
con un salario que nos mantiene en la pobreza.
With a salary that keeps us at the poverty level.
Y algo también que quiero explicarles es que muchas de nuestras compañeras
And something that I like to explain is that many of our colleagues
durante la pandemia tuvieron que dejar este trabajo porque lo poco que ganaban no les permitía mantener ni siquiera sus casas.
During the pandemic, many of our colleagues had to shut down. They had to leave this profession because what they were being paid wasn't enough to sustain their homes.
Me gustaría saber cuál sería su opinión acerca de esta situación que atravesamos nosotras durante su administración.
I would like to know what is your opinion about the situation that we're facing. What would we see during your administration? Thank you.
Mirna, gracias por el trabajo que tú y todas tus colegas han hecho durante esta pandemia. Para mí, ustedes han sido esenciales desde que yo tuve mis hijas.
Mirta, thank you so much for the work that you and your colleagues have done during this pandemic. To me, you have been an essential worker since I had my daughters.
Porque mis hijas fueron a un cuidado de familia.
Because my daughters went to a family child care provider.
Y sin ellos yo no podría estar aquí hoy.
And without them, I wouldn't be able to be here today.
Así que puede que ahora estén cuidando futuros gobernadores, pero definitivamente ayudaron a la futura gobernadora.
So it might be that right now you're taking care of future governors, but you definitely helped a future governor.
es parte del sueño americano y parte de la visión americana.
It's part of the American dream and the American vision.
El tener equidad de sueldo, igual sueldo por igual trabajo.
To have salary equity and equity in work.
Equal work for equal pay. Equal pay for equal work. Esa paridad es esencial.
That part is essential.
Y tenemos que trabajarla.
And we have to work that.
Y tiene mi compromiso de que vamos a trabajar eso definitivamente.
And you have my commitment that we're going to work on that.
Toda persona merece tener acceso a algún tipo de plan médico o servicio de salud.
Every person deserves to have access to some kind of medical service or health insurance.
Y gracias a los sindicatos, muchos de nosotros tenemos acceso también a vacaciones.
And thanks to the unions, we have benefits to retirement plans.
And vacations.
Interpreters.
Así que tenemos que trabajar en eso. Yo no te tengo una solución hoy día, pero sí tienes un compromiso mío de que yo entiendo que esos valores son parte de lo que me motiva a querer ser tu próxima gobernadora.
We have to work on that. I don't have a solution for you today, but I do have a promise that those values are important to what I'm going to work on as the next governor.
Creo que eso es todo.
Gracias.
Espera, era paridad, seguro médico de beneficios y cuál era la tercera parte.
No tenemos plan de retiro.
Plan de retiro, sí, todo eso. Tenemos que trabajarlo.
Y por favor que presten atención a nuestro contrato.
So what am I missing? And the Madam Secretary went down the list of what was mentioned, and Mita mentioned, please pay attention to our contract. We still don't have one.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. All the panelists and all the guests, and particularly Madam Secretary, for joining us and having this, these types of dialogues is what built Rhode Island, and organized labor and essential workers and workers who have a voice at work are the future of what Rhode Island is. And thank you for your time, and I just want to, there's food and refreshments for folks, and this coming Saturday at 10 a.m. at the Carpenters Hall. Yes. We're all getting together. We're all going to go canvassing for Nellie, and we need to make sure that it's not just us who show up, but we got to call all of our co-workers and do what unions do best, which is show up in mass. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Help yourself. There's lunch, there's dessert. We also have lawn signs at the door on the way out if anybody wants a lawn sign.